And but coming back from that a little bit, the primary problem, it seems to me, in terms of financing the existing stock of debt, let alone new debt, is that you don't have a central bank effectively printing money to buy the debt. And this, I think, is the big difference, say, between the United States, the UK, and the members of Euroland, if you like. And under the circumstances where you can't print money to buy your own debt, that is where the weakness appears, because there are just not enough savings to go round with all governments borrowing at the same time. And it's a clash which I find quite hard to resolve in my own mind without resorting to money printing.
Well, the other solution that they're putting forward is cutting on expenditure. So you have to reduce expenditure.
I absolutely agree. But you've got Italy in the position where they've got to roll over an enormous amount of debt. And at the moment, their budget deficit is not too bad, as it were. Sort of more or less in balance, but could go wrong, if you like, if the economy goes into recession. But how do you roll over that huge amount of debt when the banks naturally want to contract their balance sheets because they're now risk averse rather than embracing risk?
Well, I think that the markets would be much happier if Italy said, I want to roll over past debt, but I'm not asking for any new debt because I have a surplus on my budget. Now, if they not only rolled over the old debt by asking some money from markets, but also because they re-plug into the debt their profits, so to speak. So that would really allow the market to say, all right, we're going to lend money to Italy because they have a surplus and they're slowly writing down the debt and they're not asking for any more. So I think there would be money for Italian debt if Italy not only didn't ask for more, but also was using some of the surplus on the deficit, on the budget, to write off the debt.
Absolutely, so that the markets would see that there is a programme of debt reduction overall rather than just... Now, I think that makes a lot of sense. Coming back to Spain, is Spain a long way from that, do you think?
Well, Spain is in a peculiar position because our debt is not such a big amount. We must be 62% of GDP, so relatively the amount of debt we have issued is lower than British, lower than American, lower than France, and lower than Italy. So it's not so much the public sector that's in trouble as private banks and families.
Yes, exactly.
They have overextended, they have overdemanded funds from outside. Now, there's a rule in political economy which is private debt, when it's too big, becomes public debt because the government has to come to the rescue of banks.
We've certainly seen that in America.
We have indeed. And we've seen it in Britain too. So, in the end, the private sector is hugely indebted in Spain, and also some of that debt is not promising any, some of the investments that the banks have made is not promising any returns because they are in real estate, and that sector is not doing well.
Exactly, and that sector, as I understand it, is it's not being allowed to evolve away from its problems. It's almost in aspect because of the problems that would knock on to the banking system.
Indeed, well, you have two parts of the banking system in Spain. You have the savings banks and the normal banks. The ordinary banks have begun to set aside their real estate. Banco Bilbao Vizcaya said 3-4 days ago that they were creating a special division for real estate, the same with Banco Santander and others. So, but it's very big, and it'll take them time to write that off. And if prices go on falling, because they're beginning to unload all that on the market, then the problem grows. So they really, Spanish banks and savings banks really have a problem.
Yes, indeed.
They don't know how to face it really. That's one thing. The other thing is, everything would be better if we grew. So it's growth, both for Greece, for Italy, for France, for Spain. It's growth that really is the question. And so we shouldn't be asking, how can we do away with our debt and how can we manage that? Is how can we grow? And if we want to grow in Spain, you have to change the framework. We have to change labour laws. You have to change lots of things that we have here, which impede companies and people from forging ahead.
That's a very interesting answer, because the Keynesian idea of growth is just chuck money at the problem.
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked.
No.
And they're trying to get Germany to chuck money at the rest of Europe.
That's extraordinary. Say, you Germans are too productive. Will you please consume? No, thank you.
Yes. We note that you have the best economy in Europe, but that's not the point.
No. Yeah. Will you spoil it, please?
Exactly. So, yes, I mean, I agree with you, and I think it makes an awful lot of sense. It is framework, and in the general sense, there has to be a planned, if you like, reduction of government interference in the way the economy works. In pure political terms, it seems to me that this is such a different direction from that which European countries have been used to going. That, they socialise everything effectively. How difficult is it going to be for the political and the bureaucratic mindset to embrace an idea that interventionism is yesterday's story and it doesn't work, and the future has got to be less intervention?
Very difficult, especially I think because Germany is going that way too. It's always presented as a model for all of us, and what they've done during the 10 years before this crisis was to have agreements between the representatives of trade unions, of companies and the government, saying, let's cut this and do away with that. Now, that's not really the market. It's a political agreement. They've done the right thing and the economy is going well. But the method they've used is one that will push us further down the way of statism rather than towards the way of markets. So even from that point of view, it's a bit depressing. But in any case, what you certainly need is a change in the framework, and that is a matter for governments rather than social contracts or general agreements. And governments will have a very tough time. The mindset of Europeans is not that way, doesn't go that way. And if on top of that you put at the head of governments a bureaucrat, somebody coming from Brussels, because they are doing what Brussels says, I don't know how long public opinion will back them.
There's always the problem that to follow the mandate that's required is a reversal thing. So it means reversing a lot of legislation as well. And that, I think, is politically difficult. But within the European framework, it's perhaps even more difficult when so much of the legislation that is restrictive has emanated from Brussels.
Oh yes, I recently was in the UK, and there they were speaking to me about working hours. There's a maximum of working hours, and they were saying, well, some doctors are working more than the hours they should because they say that it's not working. They're at the other end of a telephone. They can be called in, but they are really in bed. So and so these sorts of interferences or rules coming from Brussels, sometimes they're well meant, but sometimes make life much more difficult for countries that have to grow.